Have you ever looked at a familiar Hollywood face and wondered how much of what you see is personal choice, and how much comes from the pressure to never grow old? For decades, celebrities have lived under a microscope where every wrinkle, photograph, and change in appearance can become a headline. Some have openly embraced cosmetic procedures. Others have faced years of speculation about changes they never confirmed. And a few have spoken candidly about results they later regretted. But behind every before and after photograph is a more complicated story than the image alone can tell. Today, we're looking beyond the shock value to explore 8 famous faces, the choices they actually discussed, and what their experiences reveal about beauty, aging, and life in the public eye. Because by the end, the biggest question may not be who changed the most, but why growing older became something Hollywood taught us to fear. Megan Fox became a Hollywood sensation almost overnight. When Transformers arrived in 2007, her dark hair, striking features, and magnetic screen presence made her one of the most photographed young actresses in America. But fame also turned her appearance into something the public felt entitled to analyze. For years, photographs of Fox fueled endless speculation about cosmetic surgery. Then, in 2024, she decided to separate rumor from reality herself. Speaking on The Call, her Daddy podcast, Fox revealed that she had undergone rhinoplasty in her early 20s, breast augmentation and later revisions, as well as Botox and fillers. But she also pushed back against claims that she had undergone procedures such as facelifts or buccal fat removal. Her honesty changed the story. Instead of strangers deciding what must have happened to her face, Fox drew a clear line between documented fact and internet speculation. And that distinction matters, because our next star never seemed particularly interested in hiding her cosmetic choices at all. Dolly Parton has spent more than 6 decades in the public eye, yet she has rarely pretended that her famous appearance happened by accident. The towering blonde hair, dramatic makeup, and carefully maintained figure were all part of a larger-than-life image she deliberately created. And when it came to cosmetic work, Dolly was unusually open. Over the years, she has acknowledged having procedures and has often discussed the subject with the same humor that made audiences love her. But behind the jokes was a surprisingly practical philosophy. Make your own choices, be careful about them, and don't allow appearance to become more important than the life you're living. That distinction makes Dolly unusual in this story. Her changing appearance was never presented as an attempt to convince audiences that she simply stopped aging. It became another part of the character she built for the stage. At nearly every age, the voice, songwriting, humor, and generosity remained bigger than the conversation about her face. But our next story takes us somewhere more complicated, where repeated transformation itself became part of the celebrity story. Long before cosmetic surgery became central to her public image, Katy was already famous. As Jordan, she emerged in Britain during the 1990s and eventually turned that attention into television appearances, books, businesses, and a celebrity brand that lasted for decades. But as the years passed, her physical transformation became almost as closely followed as her career. Unlike celebrities surrounded only by speculation, Price has spoken openly about undergoing numerous procedures. She has also acknowledged something rarely visible in dramatic before and after photographs. Surgery has an uncomfortable middle. Swelling, stitches, pain, recovery, and the possibility of wondering whether you went too far. That honesty makes her story more complicated than simply labeling the results good or bad. Price has defended her right to change her appearance, while also warning younger women about beginning cosmetic procedures too early. At times, she has even admitted looking in the mirror and questioning her own choices. Perhaps that contradiction is the real story. You can defend the freedom to change yourself while still recognizing the cost. And our next celebrity eventually traveled in almost the opposite direction, discovering that being seen with less could become more powerful than adding anything at all. For millions of viewers, Pamela Anderson will always be connected to the glamorous image of Baywatch. In the 1990s, her blonde hair, dramatic makeup, and famous red swimsuit made her one of the most recognizable women in popular culture. Her appearance wasn't simply noticed. It became part of an international brand. Anderson has been open about having breast implants, and later about having them removed before eventually undergoing augmentation again. But decades later, the most surprising change wasn't another dramatic transformation. It was her willingness to strip much of the glamour away. Beginning in 2023, Anderson drew widespread attention by appearing at major fashion events with little or no makeup. She later explained that the choice felt freeing and helped her move away from constantly chasing an idealized image. For longtime viewers who remembered the carefully constructed Pamela of the 1990s, the contrast was striking. Yet this time, transformation came through subtraction rather than addition. But accepting age becomes much harder when the entire world debates your face, as our next icon discovered. Few performers have reinvented themselves as relentlessly as Madonna. Since the 1980s, every new era brought a different sound, style, and image. Reinvention wasn't something that happened to her career. It was the career. But as Madonna grew older, the conversation changed. Increasingly, attention moved from what she was creating to how her face looked while creating it. That became impossible to ignore after the 2023 Grammy Awards. Photographs of the then 64-year-old singer triggered widespread commentary and speculation about her appearance. Madonna responded forcefully, arguing that people had focused on close-up photographs instead of the message she delivered on stage. She described the reaction as part of the ageism and misogyny faced by women who remain visible beyond middle age. Weeks later, Madonna joked that swelling from surgery had gone down. She did not identify the procedure, an important distinction when so many specific claims about her appearance remain speculation. Perhaps Madonna's story raises a question bigger than cosmetic surgery. For decades, Hollywood asked women to remain young. Then it criticized them for whatever they did while trying to navigate aging in public. And the next woman's story reveals an even more personal side of what criticism about appearance can leave behind. When Lil' Kim emerged from Brooklyn in the 1990s, she looked and sounded unlike almost anyone else in hip-hop. Her provocative fashion, fearless lyrics, and commanding presence challenged expectations of what a female rapper could be. But behind that confidence was a far more complicated relationship with appearance. Over the years, Kim's changing face became a constant subject of photographs, headlines, and online speculation. Yet some of the most important context came from Kim herself. She has spoken publicly about struggling with low self-esteem and feeling that she was not considered attractive enough. She also said that a former boyfriend physically assaulted her, leaving her with a broken nose that required medical attention and contributed to later work on her nose. That history does not explain every visible change, and it would be irresponsible to pretend that it does. Many specific procedures attributed to Kim have never been clearly confirmed by her. What her story does reveal is how little a before and after photograph can tell us about the person between those two images. And sometimes, the consequences are much less ambiguous. Our next star publicly described a cosmetic procedure that left her unhappy enough to seek surgery again. At the turn of the millennium, Tara Reid seemed to represent everything young Hollywood celebrated. With American Pie, Josie and the Pussycats, and Van Wilder, she became a familiar face of an era filled with red carpets, celebrity magazines, and relentless attention to young stars. But Reid's experience with cosmetic surgery eventually became a story she wished had unfolded differently. She has spoken publicly about undergoing breast augmentation and body contouring surgery in the mid-2000s. Reid later described being unhappy with the results, including irregularities from the body procedure and problems with her breast surgery. What followed was especially difficult because the consequences weren't private. Photographs circulated widely, and her body became material for public commentary. Eventually, Reed sought corrective surgery. Years later, her experience remains important because it exposes something the glamorous language surrounding cosmetic procedures can hide. An elective change can still produce an outcome someone never expected. Reed didn't need strangers to decide whether something had gone wrong. She told that story herself. But our final woman brings this journey to a different place. After decades of fame and her own experience with cosmetic surgery, she reached a surprisingly simple conclusion. Sometimes knowing when to stop matters more than trying to turn back time. Jane Fonda has spent more than 60 years being watched by Hollywood. Audiences saw her as the glamorous young actress, a fitness phenomenon in the 1980s, an activist, and eventually a performer entering her 80s without disappearing from public life. And unlike many stars surrounded by speculation, Fonda has been remarkably direct about cosmetic surgery. She acknowledged having a facelift. But years later, she spoke about that decision with mixed feelings. In a 2022 interview with Vogue, Fonda admitted she wasn't proud of having done it and said she eventually stopped because she didn't want to keep changing her face. That perspective carries unusual weight, coming from someone whose appearance has been scrutinized for generations. Fonda also acknowledged an uncomfortable reality. Wealth gives celebrities access to trainers, treatments, and procedures unavailable to many ordinary people. Yet her message about aging became increasingly simple. Health, movement, friendship, laughter, and continuing to participate in life mattered more than pretending time had stopped. Perhaps that is why her story belongs at the end. After 8 very different journeys, the question is no longer whether a face has changed. It is whether growing older ever needed to be treated as something that had gone wrong. Eight faces. 8 very different stories. Some choices were made openly and without regret. Others brought consequences their owners never expected. And in several cases, the public filled the gaps with assumptions that the celebrities themselves never confirmed. That may be the most important lesson behind every before and after photograph. A face can show us that time has passed, but it cannot tell us what happened in the years between those 2 images. The pressure, the insecurity, the confidence, the pain, or simply the freedom to make a personal choice. Hollywood spent generations selling youth as something worth preserving at almost any cost. Yet the stars who remain with us the longest often teach a different lesson. Growing older does not erase the person we once were. It adds to that person. Perhaps beauty was never about defeating time. Perhaps it was about reaching a point where we no longer need to. Have you ever wondered how much courage it takes to stay true to yourself when the world keeps telling you that you don't belong? Long before conversations about identity and inclusion became more common, these remarkable Black pioneers were already breaking barriers in entertainment, media, and public life. Behind the awards, applause, and historic achievements were years of perseverance, sacrifice, and determination that few people ever witnessed. Their journeys helped reshape Hollywood, inspired countless lives, and opened doors for future generations seeking acceptance and opportunity. In today's Then and Now journey, we'll revisit 8 extraordinary individuals whose influence extends far beyond fame. From groundbreaking actors and producers to fearless advocates and cultural trailblazers, each story reveals a different path to lasting impact. But which of these pioneers left the greatest legacy, and whose journey might surprise you the most? Stay with us until the very end as we rediscover their remarkable stories. Before Laverne Cox became one of Hollywood's most recognizable trailblazers, there were years when simply believing in her own future required extraordinary determination. Growing up in Mobile, Alabama, she discovered a love for dance and performing at an early age. Yet pursuing those dreams was far from easy, as she often felt different from those around her and faced constant challenges that tested her confidence. Rather than giving up, Laverne chose to focus on developing her talent, convinced that hard work and perseverance would eventually create new opportunities. That determination transformed her career in 2013 when she appeared as Sophia Bursay in the acclaimed Netflix series Orange is the New Black. Her heartfelt performance earned widespread praise and helped introduce millions of viewers to stories that had rarely been represented in mainstream television. She later made history with major award recognition and became one of the most influential voices advocating for greater inclusion and authentic storytelling throughout the entertainment industry. Today, Laverne Cox's legacy reaches far beyond acting. She has inspired countless people to pursue their dreams with confidence and dignity. But while Laverne helped change television forever, the next pioneer would go on to achieve a milestone that many once believed was impossible. For years, Michaela J. Rodriguez pursued her passion with little certainty that Hollywood would ever recognize her talent. Raised in Newark, New Jersey, she fell in love with music, theater, and performing while still young. Instead of allowing limited opportunities to define her future, she devoted herself to mastering her craft through auditions, stage performances, and years of disciplined training. Every setback became another reason to work even harder. Her breakthrough arrived with the acclaimed FX series Pose, where she portrayed Blanca Evangelista with remarkable warmth, strength, and compassion. The performance earned widespread praise from critics and audiences alike, turning Michaela into one of television's most respected performers. In 2022, she reached another historic milestone by becoming the first transgender woman to win the Golden Globe Award for Best Actress in a television drama, a moment that reflected both her extraordinary talent and years of perseverance. Beyond acting, Michaela continues to encourage authenticity, creativity, and equal opportunities within the entertainment industry. Her journey proves that lasting success is built through dedication rather than shortcuts. Yet while Michaela made history on television, the next remarkable pioneer would help reshape Hollywood from behind the camera as well as in front of it. Long before Janet Mock became one of Hollywood's most respected writers and producers, she believed that stories had the power to change hearts as much as headlines. Growing up in Honolulu, Hawaii, she faced financial hardships while searching for a place where she could fully embrace her identity. Rather than allowing those experiences to define her future, Janet focused on education and journalism, convinced that honest storytelling could create understanding where fear and misunderstanding once existed. Her career reached a turning point in 2014 with the publication of her best-selling memoir, Redefining Realness. The book earned critical acclaim for its thoughtful and deeply personal reflections, introducing many readers to experiences that had rarely been explored in mainstream publishing. Janet later expanded her influence by joining the groundbreaking FX series Pose as a writer, director, and producer, helping ensure that its stories were told with authenticity, compassion, and historical care. Her work behind the camera helped shape one of television's most celebrated dramas. Today, Janet Mock continues to champion diverse voices and meaningful representation across film and television. Her legacy reminds us that powerful stories can change perspectives for generations. But while Janet transformed Hollywood through words and vision, the next trailblazer first had to overcome homelessness before finding her place in the spotlight. Before Dominique Jackson became one of the most unforgettable faces of Pose, she had already survived challenges that would have caused many people to abandon their dreams. Born in Tobago, she spent much of her early life in an environment where acceptance was difficult to find. Seeking a better future, she eventually moved to the United States with little more than determination and hope. The road ahead was anything but easy, bringing periods of financial hardship and uncertainty as she worked tirelessly to build a new life. Everything began to change when Dominique discovered New York City's ballroom community, a place where creativity, resilience, and self-expression flourished. That experience helped shape both her confidence and her career. Her breakthrough came with the role of Electra Abundance in Pose, where her commanding presence, elegance, and emotional depth made her one of the series' most memorable characters. The performance introduced audiences around the world to a powerful story of perseverance while earning widespread praise from critics and fans alike. Today, Dominique Jackson continues to use her voice to encourage dignity, opportunity, and authentic representation throughout the entertainment industry. Her remarkable journey proves that true strength often grows from life's greatest challenges. But the next pioneer would take a completely different path, transforming internet fame into a groundbreaking career that no one could have predicted. Unlike many of the pioneers on this list, T.S. Madison didn't wait for Hollywood to open a door. She built her own. Born in Miami, Florida, she grew up during a time when opportunities for Black transgender women were extremely limited. Facing financial struggles and constant doubt from others, she refused to let those obstacles determine her future. Instead, she embraced her vibrant personality, believing that authenticity would eventually become her greatest strength. Long before social media transformed the entertainment industry, Madison recognized its potential to connect directly with audiences. Her candid humor, confidence, and unmistakable charisma quickly attracted millions of followers, allowing her to create a successful career on her own terms. Rather than remaining an internet sensation, she expanded into television, acting, business, and producing. In 2021, she made history by becoming the first Black transgender woman to both star in and executive produce her own reality television series, proving that independent creators could reshape the entertainment landscape. Today, T.S. Madison is admired not only for her success, but also for encouraging others to believe in their own potential and create opportunities instead of waiting for them. Her journey shows that determination and innovation can rewrite the rules. But while Madison transformed the digital entertainment world, the next remarkable pioneer combined acting with technology to create opportunities that continue changing lives today. Before Angelica Ross became an acclaimed actress and entrepreneur, she was simply searching for a chance to rebuild her life. Raised in Kenosha, Wisconsin, she faced rejection and financial instability as a young adult, leaving her uncertain about what the future might hold. Rather than allowing those hardships to define her, Angelica made a remarkable decision that would change everything. She taught herself computer programming, believing that new skills could create opportunities where none seemed to exist. That determination led her to found TransTech Social Enterprises in 2014, an organization dedicated to helping transgender people develop technology skills and pursue meaningful careers. While growing that mission, Angelica also followed her passion for acting. Her breakthrough came with Pose, where she portrayed candy ferocity with emotional depth and authenticity. She later expanded her career through American Horror Story and made Broadway history by becoming the first openly transgender woman to play Roxy Hart in Chicago, further demonstrating her remarkable versatility. Today, Angelica Ross continues to inspire others through entrepreneurship, education, and the arts. Her story proves that lasting change often begins when one person decides to create opportunities instead of waiting for them. But while Angelica built bridges between technology and entertainment, the next trailblazer would make history by expanding visibility from an entirely different perspective, as a pioneering Black transgender man on network television. Brian Michael Smith's path to success was shaped not by instant recognition, but by quiet perseverance and an unwavering belief in authenticity. Born in Ann Arbor, Michigan, he grew up with a deep passion for storytelling and performance. At a time when Black transgender men were rarely represented in film or television, Brian faced the challenge of pursuing a career without many visible role models. Instead of becoming discouraged, he remained committed to his craft, trusting that meaningful opportunities would eventually come through dedication and patience. His breakthrough arrived with the acclaimed series Queen Sugar, where his heartfelt performance demonstrated the importance of authentic casting and thoughtful storytelling. Brian later reached another historic milestone by joining 911, Lone Star as the first black transgender man to become a series regular on a network television drama. Rather than allowing his identity to define every aspect of his work, he earned praise for portraying a capable, compassionate, and relatable character whose story resonated with audiences far beyond Hollywood. Today, Brian Michael Smith continues to advocate for authentic representation while inspiring future generations of performers to pursue their dreams with confidence. His remarkable career proves that lasting progress often begins with those willing to quietly lead by example. Yet the final person on our list didn't change history through television or film alone. She helped lay the foundation for an entire movement that continues to inspire people around the world. While many pioneers on this list transformed Hollywood through film and television, Miss Major Griffin Gracie changed history in a different and equally powerful way. Born in Chicago, Illinois, she came of age during a period when many people who lived openly as transgender faced overwhelming discrimination, limited opportunities, and constant uncertainty. Despite those challenges, she refused to let fear silence her, choosing instead to dedicate her life to supporting others who often had nowhere else to turn. Miss Major is widely recognized as one of the surviving participants of the 1969 Stonewall Uprising, a defining moment in the modern movement for LGBTQ+ rights in the United States. Rather than seeking fame, she spent decades working directly with transgender communities, focusing on housing, healthcare access, mentoring, and support for individuals affected by incarceration. Her leadership was built not on public recognition, but on compassion, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to helping others build better futures. Today, Miss Major Griffin Gracie is respected as one of the most influential advocates of her generation. Her extraordinary life reminds us that lasting change is often created by those who quietly dedicate themselves to serving others, even when few people are watching. The pioneers you've met today followed different paths, but together they helped expand opportunities, inspire new generations, and leave a legacy that continues to shape history. The stories we've explored today remind us that history is often shaped by people who refuse to give up, even when the path ahead seems uncertain. Each of these remarkable pioneers followed a different journey, yet they all shared the same determination to create opportunities not only for themselves, but also for those who would come after them. Their achievements have influenced entertainment, media, culture, and countless lives around the world, proving that perseverance, talent, and compassion can leave a lasting legacy. Which of these inspiring journeys touched you the most? Was there someone on this list whose story you hadn't heard before? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this Then and Now documentary, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel for more fascinating stories, celebrating the remarkable people who have helped shape history. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in our next journey through Hollywood's unforgettable past and present. For decades, Hollywood taught us to notice when a woman gained weight, lost weight, or simply stopped looking the way we remembered her. But something has changed. Today, dramatic transformations can happen faster than ever, and prescription weight loss medications have added a new layer to an already complicated conversation. For stars like Kelly Clarkson, Amy Schumer, Rebel Wilson, and Oprah Winfrey, the real story isn't simply what happened on the scale. It's what happened when private health decisions collided with public expectations. Some have spoken openly about medication. Others have discussed lifestyle changes, while some have chosen to keep the reasons for their changing appearance private. So rather than speculate about what hasn't been confirmed, we're looking at what these women have actually said, and what their stories reveal about health, aging, body image, and an industry that has judged women's bodies for generations. And the first transformation unfolded where millions could watch it happen. Kelly Clarkson has spent more than 2 decades growing up in public. When she won the first season of American Idol in 2002, viewers weren't simply introduced to a remarkable voice. They met someone who seemed unusually ordinary by Hollywood standards, funny, candid, and comfortable enough to laugh at herself. That familiarity also meant her appearance rarely escaped public attention. Over the years, Kelly's changing weight became a recurring subject in magazines and online commentary. Then, after moving her talk show to New York, viewers began noticing another change. She was becoming noticeably slimmer, week by week, right in front of a daytime television audience. Eventually, Kelly addressed what many had been asking. She revealed that her doctor had recommended a prescription medication after concerns about her blood work. She had resisted for roughly 2 years because she was afraid to take it. And despite widespread assumptions, Kelly made one point unmistakably clear. The medication was not Ozempic. She has never publicly identified what it was. That distinction matters. A visible transformation doesn't give the public permission to fill in the missing details. And while Kelly eventually corrected the speculation surrounding her story, the next woman went much further, describing what happened when she actually tried Ozempic herself. Amy Schumer built much of her career around saying the uncomfortable thing out loud. She joked about her body, rejected Hollywood perfection, and rarely pretended that life behind the camera was as polished as the photograph suggested. So when weight loss drugs became Hollywood's newest open secret, Amy did something characteristic. She talked about her own experience. She revealed that she had tried Ozempic and lost roughly 30 pounds. From the outside, it appeared to work remarkably well. But Amy later described a very different reality. She experienced severe nausea, vomiting, and exhaustion. At one point, she said she was essentially bedridden. Even playing ball with her young son became difficult because she simply didn't have the energy. That experience led her to stop taking it. Years later, Amy said she had a much better experience with Mounjaro, another GLP-1 medication. Her story, therefore, isn't an argument for or against these drugs. It illustrates something less dramatic, but more important. The same treatment can affect 2 people, or even the same person at different times, very differently. For Amy, becoming thinner wasn't worth much when she couldn't live normally. But the next woman's transformation created a different question altogether. Because millions once knew her for an anthem celebrating the body she already had. When Meghan Trainor released All About That Bass in 2014, she became associated almost overnight with a message. Millions of listeners understood immediately. You didn't have to look like a fashion model to feel attractive. For young women growing up under increasingly intense social media pressure, that message carried real weight. But more than a decade later, Meghan's life and her body were in a very different place. After having 2 children, she began focusing more seriously on her health and fitness. As her appearance changed, speculation followed. Meghan eventually addressed the conversation herself, confirming that she had used Mounjaro as part of her weight loss journey, alongside changes to her diet and exercise routine. She has also emphasized becoming stronger and healthier rather than simply becoming smaller. That distinction changes the story. At 20, body acceptance may mean learning not to hate what you see in the mirror. Years later, after pregnancies, health concerns, and changing priorities, it can also mean deciding to care for that same body differently. Perhaps growing into a new version of yourself doesn't erase what you believed before. And that question becomes even more complicated with the next woman. Because she didn't just challenge a beauty standard. She helped change who the fashion industry believed belonged on its biggest covers. In 2016, Ashley Graham did something the fashion world once seemed determined to tell women like her was impossible. She became the first plus-size model to appear on the cover of the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue. The significance went far beyond one photograph. Ashley spoke openly about cellulite, curves, and learning to stop measuring herself against other women. For countless people who had spent years seeing only one kind of body celebrated in magazines, she represented something larger than herself. A decade later, Ashley's appearance has naturally continued to evolve, and photographs of a slimmer-looking Graham have generated plenty of commentary. But there is an important line we shouldn't cross. Ashley has not publicly confirmed using Ozempic or another GLP-1 medication for weight loss, so assigning one to her would turn observation into speculation. And perhaps that's the more interesting story. Once the public turns someone into a symbol, we can begin expecting that person to remain frozen in the image that first inspired us. But what happens when that burden of representation falls on someone at an even younger age? That's where Barbie Ferreira's story takes us next. Barbie Ferreira was still a teenager when the fashion world began turning her body into a statement. As a young curve model, simply appearing confidently in campaigns was enough for strangers to label her a body positivity activist. Years later, Barbie admitted that the title had never been entirely hers to choose. She was a kid entering an industry with rigid beauty standards, yet suddenly she was expected to represent something much larger than herself. Then her body changed. As Barbie lost weight in her 20s, public attention shifted with it. She later acknowledged something remarkably candid. Receiving compliments about losing weight could become addictive. The approval itself could become part of the problem. Today, searches and headlines still focus heavily on her changing appearance. Barbie has deliberately resisted explaining every fluctuation, arguing that constantly discussing women's weight only keeps the obsession alive. She has not publicly confirmed using Ozempic or another GLP-1 for her transformation. Perhaps that is the real lesson. Representation can open doors, but it can also become another kind of cage. And the next woman spent years representing millions of viewers on television, before changing her own mind about a treatment she once questioned. For years, Chrissy Metz represented something television rarely showed with much dignity. As Kate Pearson on This Is Us, she portrayed a plus-size woman whose life included romance, ambition, family, disappointment, and joy, not simply her weight. Off-screen, Chrissy was equally careful about the message she sent. She repeatedly emphasized that changing her body would be her own decision, made for health rather than to satisfy Hollywood. And for years, she remained skeptical of GLP-1 medications. Then her thinking changed. In 2026, Chrissy publicly revealed that she had begun using a GLP-1, though she did not identify the specific medication. She explained that getting older, entering perimenopause, and watching obesity-related health problems affect her family had forced her to reconsider assumptions she once held. She also described benefits beyond the scale, including less joint discomfort, improved mobility, and better blood work. At the same time, she has continued strength training and made clear that medication isn't a magic wand. Perhaps there is no contradiction here at all. Sometimes experience gives us information our younger selves simply didn't have. But Chrissy was free to change her mind. The next woman faced a stranger problem. Hollywood reportedly had the financial reason for wanting her body not to change. Rebel Wilson's story exposes a side of Hollywood that audiences rarely get to see. After Bridesmaids and especially Pitch Perfect, Rebel discovered that being the fat, funny girl wasn't merely part of her image. It had become commercially valuable. Her size helped define the characters Hollywood knew how to sell. And she later revealed that her own agents were against her losing weight because that particular niche was working. Then Rebel decided to change anyway. During what she called her year of health, she transformed her eating habits, exercised consistently, and ultimately lost around 60 pounds. Fertility was also part of the decision. Rebel has explained that becoming healthier mattered as she considered motherhood. What makes her story revealing isn't simply the number on the scale. It's what happened when her personal goals collided with a professional identity that other people had built around her body. Hollywood had rewarded Rebel for being different from its traditional ideal. Yet that difference eventually became another box she was expected to remain inside. She chose to leave it. And that brings us to perhaps the most fitting final story. A woman whose changing weight wasn't watched for a few years, but debated by America for decades. Oprah Winfrey. Few famous women have had their weight discussed as publicly, or for as long, as Oprah Winfrey. For decades, Americans watched her lose weight, regain it, try new diets, and speak openly about the frustration that followed. Oprah herself has acknowledged how deeply that cycle shaped the way she thought about willpower and personal failure. Then her perspective changed. After conversations with obesity specialists, Oprah began viewing obesity as a chronic disease rather than simply a failure of discipline. She also publicly acknowledged using prescribed GLP-1 medication as part of her own treatment. Later, she revealed that she stopped the medication for about a year, regained weight, and came away believing that long-term treatment may be necessary for her. But perhaps the most significant transformation wasn't physical. In 2024, she used a television special to confront the shame surrounding obesity and weight loss drugs. By 2026, she was still pushing that conversation forward, arguing for education rather than judgment. After decades of having strangers judge her body, Oprah had finally changed the question. Not, why couldn't I control my weight? But, why did we assume it was simply about control? And that question brings all 8 of these stories together. 8 women. 8 very different relationships with health, weight, and the expectations that followed them through public life. Some chose medication. Some changed their minds about it. Others have never confirmed using it at all, and that distinction matters. Because a photograph can show us that someone's body has changed, but it cannot tell us why. Perhaps the deeper story isn't about becoming thinner. It's about how quickly we turn another person's body into something we believe we're entitled to explain. Hollywood has spent generations teaching women that they are too heavy, too thin, too old, or simply not what audiences expect them to be. Yet age eventually teaches a quieter lesson. Bodies change because lives change. Health matters. So does honesty, but dignity matters too. Maybe the question we should carry with us isn't whether these women should have changed. It's why we ever believe they owed us the same version of themselves forever. For generations, Hollywood has represented glamour, success, and unforgettable legends whose faces became part of our lives. Yet behind the red carpets, sold-out concerts, and standing ovations, many of those same stars were carrying burdens that audiences rarely saw. Some struggled with loneliness, despite being surrounded by millions of fans. Others faced relentless pressure to remain perfect in an industry that rarely forgives mistakes or growing older. For a number of Hollywood's biggest names, alcohol became a way to cope with those invisible battles. Sometimes quietly, sometimes publicly, and sometimes with life-changing consequences. Today's documentary isn't about judging these remarkable individuals. It's about understanding the human stories behind the headlines and remembering that even the brightest stars could face deeply personal challenges. Some ultimately found strength and recovery, while others left behind powerful lessons that continue to resonate today. As you watch, which story do you believe best reflects the hidden cost of fame? Let's begin with one of the most legendary entertainers Hollywood has ever known, Frank Sinatra. Few names in entertainment history carry the same weight as Frank Sinatra. With timeless classics like My Way and Fly Me to the Moon, his unmistakable voice defined an era and earned him a place among Hollywood's greatest icons. Confident, charismatic, and endlessly admired, Sinatra appeared to embody success both on and off the stage. To millions of fans, he seemed larger than life. Behind that polished image, however, life was often far more complicated. Friends and biographers have described periods when Sinatra leaned heavily on alcohol, particularly during emotionally difficult chapters of his life. Public scrutiny, demanding performances, and personal heartbreak sometimes left him searching for an escape. His well-known affection for Jack Daniels became part of his public image, blurring the line between celebrity legend and personal reality. Yet those closest to him also remembered a man capable of remarkable generosity, loyalty, and deep emotional sensitivity. Rather than defining Frank Sinatra by his struggles, history remembers the extraordinary talent that transformed American music forever. His story reminds us that even the strongest public figures may carry private burdens invisible to everyone else. But while Sinatra's challenges unfolded after reaching worldwide fame, the next Hollywood legend faced alcohol at an age when most children were still discovering who they were. Elizabeth Taylor captivated audiences from childhood and grew into one of Hollywood's most glamorous and celebrated actresses. With unforgettable performances in films like Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, Butterfield 8, and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, she became the very definition of classic movie star elegance. Her dazzling beauty, extraordinary talent, and headline-making romances made her one of the most photographed women of the 20th century. Yet behind that glamorous image was a woman who endured years of physical pain and emotional upheaval. Throughout her life, Taylor underwent numerous surgeries and faced serious health challenges, often requiring powerful medications during recovery. Combined with the intense public attention surrounding her personal relationships, including her passionate and often turbulent marriage to Richard Burton, those pressures sometimes contributed to periods when alcohol became part of an already difficult chapter. Rather than hiding forever, she eventually acknowledged the need for help and sought treatment, becoming one of the first major Hollywood stars to speak openly about recovery and the importance of addressing addiction with honesty rather than shame. Elizabeth Taylor's legacy extends far beyond the hardships she faced. She remained an Academy Award-winning actress, a humanitarian, and a fearless advocate for important causes, proving that vulnerability and strength can exist side by side. Their love story fascinated the world. But the man waiting on the other side of that romance would face an even longer and more visible struggle with alcohol. Richard Burton possessed one of the most commanding voices ever heard in film and theater. From The Robe and Beckett to Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, his remarkable talent earned him widespread acclaim and multiple Academy Award nominations. Off-screen, his passionate romance with Elizabeth Taylor became one of Hollywood's most famous love stories, captivating audiences around the world. Together, they seemed to live a life few could even imagine. Behind the glamour, however, Burton often spoke candidly about the pressures that accompanied fame, long filming schedules, constant media attention, and the emotional intensity of both his work and personal life gradually took their toll. Over the years, alcohol became an increasingly visible part of his daily routine. Despite maintaining an extraordinary level of professionalism for much of his career, his health slowly reflected the cumulative effects of years of heavy drinking. Even so, colleagues consistently praised his intelligence, generosity, and unmatched dedication to his craft, qualities that were never overshadowed by the difficulties he faced. Richard Burton's story is a reminder that exceptional talent does not shield anyone from personal struggles. His performances continue to inspire new generations, while his life encourages a more compassionate understanding of the challenges that can exist behind remarkable success. While Burton's battle unfolded under the glare of worldwide fame, the next Hollywood legend chose a very different path, one that would eventually become one of the industry's greatest stories of lasting recovery. Long before he became internationally admired for unforgettable performances in The Silence of the Lambs, The Remains of the Day, and The Father, Anthony Hopkins was a young actor still searching for confidence and direction. Although audiences came to know him for his calm presence and extraordinary discipline, his early years were marked by uncertainty. As his career slowly gained momentum, alcohol gradually became an unhealthy way of coping with anxiety and self-doubt. Hopkins has spoken openly about reaching a turning point in 1975, when he realized that continuing down the same path could cost him both his career and his future. Instead of allowing those struggles to define him, he made the life-changing decision to stop drinking completely. Decades later, he continues to share his story with remarkable honesty, encouraging others to believe that meaningful change is possible, regardless of age or circumstance. His willingness to discuss recovery has inspired countless people facing similar challenges, transforming a deeply personal battle into a message of hope. Today, Anthony Hopkins is celebrated not only as one of the greatest actors of his generation, but also as a powerful example of resilience, proving that some of life's most important victories happen far away from the cameras. While Hopkins found a second chance through sobriety, the next star on our list was introduced to fame so young that childhood itself was overshadowed by Hollywood's relentless spotlight. For many Americans, Drew Barrymore represents resilience as much as talent. She became a household name almost overnight after her unforgettable performance in E.T., the Extraterrestrial, charming audiences with a warmth that seemed far beyond her years. As one of Hollywood's brightest child stars, she appeared to have a future filled with endless opportunity. Yet the reality behind the cameras was far more complicated than most people realized. Growing up in the spotlight meant facing adult pressures long before she was emotionally prepared. Barrymore has spoken candidly about being introduced to alcohol at a remarkably young age, followed by increasingly difficult personal challenges during childhood. By her early teens, she had already entered treatment, an experience that forced her to confront obstacles few children should ever face. Rather than allowing those years to define the rest of her life, she gradually rebuilt her confidence, her career, and her sense of purpose. Over time, she became an accomplished actress, producer, author, and television host, often using her own experiences to encourage empathy instead of judgment. Drew Barrymore's journey reminds us that recovery is rarely a single moment. It is a lifelong process shaped by courage, honesty, and hope. Her story proves that even after the darkest chapters, new beginnings remain possible. But while Drew found her footing early in adulthood, the next Hollywood star struggled to reclaim his life after watching extraordinary success slowly slip away. During the 1980s, Mickey Rourke was widely regarded as one of Hollywood's most magnetic leading men. With memorable performances in films like Diner, 902 Weeks, and Angel Heart, he projected an intensity that set him apart from many of his contemporaries. Critics praised his natural screen presence, while audiences were captivated by his charisma and unpredictable energy. For a time, it seemed he was destined to become one of the defining stars of his generation. As his career progressed, however, personal struggles began to overshadow his professional success. Rourke has spoken openly about periods when alcohol became part of a much larger battle involving disappointment, emotional pain, and the pressures of fame. His decision to step away from Hollywood and return to professional boxing added new physical and emotional challenges, making it even harder to regain stability. Yet despite years of setbacks, he refused to give up. His acclaimed performance in The Wrestler reminded audiences of the remarkable talent that had never truly disappeared, earning widespread praise and introducing his work to a new generation of movie lovers. Mickey Rourke's story demonstrates that careers can recover even after long periods of uncertainty, especially when perseverance outweighs past mistakes. Yet while Rourke fought to rebuild his reputation, the next legend brought laughter to millions, even as he quietly carried struggles that few people fully understood. Robin Williams had a rare gift for making people laugh while revealing the extraordinary depth of the human experience. Whether bringing boundless energy to Good Morning Vietnam, inspiring audiences in Dead Poets Society, or voicing the unforgettable genie in Aladdin, he created performances that continue to touch generations of viewers. His warmth, quick wit, and compassion made him one of Hollywood's most beloved figures. Behind that remarkable talent, however, Williams experienced personal challenges that he never tried to hide completely. Early in his career, he struggled with alcohol and substance use before choosing a path toward recovery. For many years, he maintained his sobriety and spoke honestly about the importance of support, self-awareness, and taking life one day at a time. Later in life, he acknowledged facing new difficulties while continuing to work and create. Those who knew him often described a generous, thoughtful man who cared deeply about others, even while managing private struggles of his own. Today, Robin Williams is remembered not for the hardships he faced, but for the kindness, laughter, and hope he shared with millions around the world. His life reminds us that compassion is often the most meaningful response when we learn that someone has been carrying an unseen burden. Our final story, however, may surprise many viewers, because one of Hollywood's most famous hard-drinking legends wasn't always what he appeared to be. Dean Martin built an unforgettable career on effortless charm, smooth vocals, and a relaxed stage presence that made audiences feel as though they were spending an evening with an old friend. Whether performing timeless songs like Everybody Loves Somebody or starring alongside fellow members of the Rat Pack, Martin cultivated the image of a man who never seemed to take life too seriously. Part of that persona included always having a drink in his hand, leading many fans to believe he was constantly under the influence. The reality, however, was often more complicated. Those who worked closely with Martin have shared that the carefree, slightly tipsy character was, at least in part, a carefully crafted performance. On many occasions, the glass he carried reportedly contained apple juice rather than whiskey, allowing him to maintain the illusion while remaining fully in control of his performance. That distinction reminds us how easily public image can become accepted as fact, especially in an era when celebrity personas were carefully protected. Like many entertainers of his generation, Martin also experienced profound personal losses that affected him deeply, particularly later in life. Dean Martin's story closes our documentary with an important reminder. What audiences see is rarely the complete picture. Behind the spotlight are human beings with private struggles, quiet resilience, and lives far more complex than any public image could ever reveal. The stories we've explored today remind us that fame can open extraordinary doors, but it cannot protect anyone from life's deepest struggles. Behind the awards, standing ovations, and unforgettable performances were individuals searching for the same things many of us seek: peace, belonging, and hope. Some found the strength to rebuild their lives through recovery, while others left behind lessons that continue to resonate long after the cameras stopped rolling. Perhaps that is the most enduring part of their legacy. We remember Frank Sinatra's voice, Elizabeth Taylor's brilliance, Anthony Hopkins' resilience, Robin Williams' kindness, and the remarkable talents of every legend we've discussed. Not because they were perfect, but because they remained profoundly human. Their journeys encourage us to respond to personal challenges with understanding rather than judgment, and to recognize the quiet courage it often takes to ask for help. Which story touched you the most? And which Hollywood legend's journey do you think offers the greatest lesson for future generations? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for spending your time with Hollywood Katy today. If you appreciate these deeper looks behind the spotlight, don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, take care. There was a time when Hollywood taught America what beauty was supposed to look like. We watched familiar faces on television, admired glamorous photographs in magazines, and rarely imagined what might happen when the cameras stopped rolling and age began to leave its mark. For some public figures, cosmetic procedures became a way to preserve confidence or reshape an identity. For others, a seemingly simple decision led somewhere they never expected. Behind the dramatic before and after photographs are stories of pressure, personal choice, medical risk, and the difficult question of how much we should change in order to remain the person the world remembers. Today, we're looking beyond the photographs and headlines at 8 very different transformations, separating documented facts from decades of speculation. And our first story begins with a woman millions of Americans remember from a magical bottle, whose approach to growing older may surprise you. For millions of Americans, Barbara Eden will always be Jeannie, the sparkling television icon who could change everything with a blink and a nod. I Dream of Jeannie made her a household name in the 1960s, and remarkably, audiences are still celebrating her decades later. Now in her 90s, Eden continues to appear in public with the same recognizable smile. That has inevitably invited speculation about cosmetic work, but there is no solid public confirmation that she underwent major plastic surgery. What Eden herself has consistently discussed is far less mysterious: staying active, exercising, eating in moderation, and refusing to let a number determine how she lives. Perhaps that is why her story feels different. Her face has aged, as every face does, yet the woman audiences remember has never disappeared behind it. But our next woman faced a very different kind of pressure. In the world of high fashion, appearance wasn't simply personal. It was part of the empire. When Donatella Versace stepped forward after the murder of her brother Gianni in 1997, she inherited far more than a fashion house. She inherited expectations, comparisons, and a spotlight that rarely looked away. Over the decades, Donatella developed an image almost as recognizable as the Versace name itself. Platinum blonde hair, dramatic makeup, towering heels, and an unapologetically glamorous style. As her appearance changed with age, photographs fueled years of speculation about cosmetic procedures. But separating observation from fact matters. Many specific procedures attributed to her have never been publicly confirmed by Donatella herself. What she has spoken about openly is confidence. Her philosophy has remained remarkably consistent. Fashion should make people feel powerful, sensual, and free. Even in an industry that relentlessly studies women's faces as they grow older, Donatella never seemed interested in disappearing quietly. Her transformation, then, isn't simply written on her face. It is also the story of surviving enormous loss and creating an identity outside her brother's shadow. But the next person didn't merely develop a signature look. He deliberately set out to resemble one of the world's most photographed women. Long before filters could reshape a face with one tap, Jordan James Park was transforming his appearance in real life. The British makeup artist became famous during the 2010s for enormous lips, dramatic brows, and his fascination with Kim Kardashian's glamorous image. Headlines portrayed him as a man spending a fortune to become Kim's double. Jordan's own explanation was more complicated. He admired her certainly, but also insisted that he wasn't trying to look exactly like her. What he wanted was attention, and a look unmistakably his own. By 2015, that pursuit had brought him to botched. Jordan described himself as a filler addict, and his heavily injected lips had begun leaking. Doctors Paul Nassif and Terry Dubrow urged him to reduce the injections. Yet cosmetic procedures remained a major part of his life, and he later returned to the program with a dramatically different appearance. Then, in February 2026, Jordan's story took an unexpected and tragic turn. He died in London at just 34. Police said the death remained unexplained, while investigators examined information suggesting he may have been undergoing a cosmetic procedure beforehand. No official cause should be assumed. Jordan spent years insisting that looking different made him happy. His story leaves behind a more difficult question. When transformation becomes part of your identity, where does changing yourself finally end? And decades before Jordan became the lip king, one socialite had already become the world's most famous and misunderstood face of extreme transformation. Long before social media turned celebrity faces into daily conversation, Jocelyn Wildenstein discovered what it meant to have the world stare at hers. The Swiss socialite became a tabloid fixture during her bitter 1990s divorce from billionaire art dealer Alec Wildenstein. But soon, the divorce itself was competing with something else for attention: Jocelyn's striking feline appearance. Newspapers gave her nicknames she never asked for, most famously Catwoman, and stories about supposedly extensive cosmetic surgery followed her for the rest of her life. Yet Jocelyn told a different story. She argued that the press exaggerated her surgical history and pointed to old family photographs, saying her high cheekbones and distinctive eyes were partly inherited. Even late in life, she continued disputing the popular version of her transformation. That contradiction may be what makes her story so fascinating. For decades, millions believed they knew exactly what had happened to Jocelyn's face, while Jocelyn insisted they didn't know her at all. She died in Paris on December 31, 2024, leaving behind an image famous around the world, but a personal story far less certain than the headline suggested. And our next woman faced something very different. Her transformation wasn't merely debated in photographs. After surgery, she said she could no longer fully close her eyes. Yulia Tarasevich wasn't chasing a completely different face. By her own account, she wanted to correct a few signs of aging. The Russian model and beauty pageant competitor had been a runner-up in Mrs. Russia International when, in December 2020, she entered a clinic in Krasnodar for cosmetic facial surgery. What followed was far more serious than the modest rejuvenation she expected. After the operation, Yulia developed severe swelling and problems controlling her facial muscles. Her eyelids would not fully close. Smiling became difficult. Later medical findings documented facial nerve problems, tissue complications, and impaired blinking. She sought additional treatment and eventually took legal action. The surgeons initially argued that an underlying condition contributed to what happened, but subsequent forensic medical examinations cited technical violations during the original operation and connected them to significant harm to Yulia's health. For a woman accustomed to being judged by her appearance, the cruelest consequence wasn't simply looking different. Ordinary things most of us never think about. Blinking comfortably, sleeping with closed eyes, smiling naturally, had become difficult. Yulia wanted to soften a few signs of time. Instead, she entered a years-long struggle to recover basic functions she once took for granted. And the next woman learned an equally painful lesson. Not in an operating room, but after trusting someone who offered injections that were never what they seemed. Before her face became the subject of headlines, Lin May was famous for something entirely different. During the 1970s and 1980s, the Mexican vedette became a striking presence in nightclub entertainment and cinema. Known for dancing, elaborate costumes, and the confidence she carried onto a stage. At the height of that success, however, she made a decision she would spend decades trying to undo. According to Lin, she was still young when two women approached her with an enticing promise. They could make her cheekbones more beautiful. She agreed to the injections. Only later, she said, did she discover that what had been placed into her face was cooking oil. The consequences didn't appear all at once. Lin later described inflammation and hard lumps developing beneath her skin. Attempts to repair the damage led her through multiple doctors and corrective procedures. She has spoken openly about becoming so distressed by her reflection that, for a period, she did not want to look into a mirror. Years later, however, Lin's message is less about appearance than regret. She has warned younger people not to repeat her mistake. A warning made more powerful by the fact that she was already young, successful, and beautiful when someone convinced her she needed something more. But our next man wasn't deceived into changing his face. He pursued transformation deliberately and took it further than almost anyone the world had ever seen. Dennis Avner wasn't trying to look younger. He was trying to make the person he saw on the outside resemble the identity he believed existed within. Before the world knew him as Stalking Cat, Avner served as a sonar technician in the U.S. Navy and later worked with computers and electronics. Beginning around 1980, however, his appearance started an extraordinary transformation. Dennis said he had Huron and Lakota ancestry and felt a profound connection to the tiger as his totem. He described his transformation as his interpretation of an old spiritual tradition, an explanation that should be understood as Dennis's own belief rather than an established cultural practice. Over roughly 25 years, the changes became increasingly elaborate. Tiger stripes covered much of his skin. His teeth were replaced with feline-style dentures and fangs. His upper lip was split, his ears reshaped, and implants altered the contours of his forehead and nose. Piercings and implanted mounts allowed him to attach artificial whiskers. He even wore feline contact lenses and, at times, a robotic tail. To strangers, the result could seem startling. To Dennis, however, it wasn't a costume. He repeatedly described it as an outward expression of something deeply personal. Avner died in Nevada in November 2012 at 54. His remarkable appearance made him famous, but behind it was a man who spent decades trying to reconcile identity with the body he had been given. And our final story turns that idea completely around. Carol Bryan wasn't searching for an extreme new identity. She simply hoped to look a little younger, and that ordinary wish would change her life. Of all the transformations in this story, Carol Bryan's may be the hardest to hear, because she never wanted to become someone else. In 2009, at 47, Carol sought facial fillers to restore volume to her forehead and cheeks. She had used cosmetic treatments before and believed this would be another manageable procedure. Instead, according to the American Society of Plastic Surgeons, the practitioner treating her was not a board-certified plastic surgeon and injected her aggressively with materials that were not FDA approved. What followed changed nearly every part of her life. Her face began swelling and contracting. As the damage worsened, Carol withdrew from friends and family and eventually stopped looking at herself in mirrors. She later spoke openly about reaching such despair that she considered ending her life. Finding help took years. Reconstructive surgeon Dr. Reza Jarahi and his team at UCLA eventually began a complex series of operations. Carol underwent 7 reconstructive surgeries as doctors removed damaged tissue and attempted to restore both function and a more natural facial contour. The original injections had already compromised her vision, and she ultimately lost sight permanently in one eye. Yet Carol refused to let that be the final chapter. She began sharing her experience publicly, turning something deeply painful into a warning for others. Cosmetic injections may appear simple, but they are still medical procedures requiring qualified professionals and informed decisions. Carol went looking for a younger reflection. What she eventually found was something far more enduring. A reason to make sure someone else would think twice before placing their face, their health, and their trust into the wrong hands. Looking back at these 8 lives, perhaps the most revealing thing isn't how much a face can change, but why someone chooses to change it. For some, transformation meant confidence and self-expression. For others, it brought consequences they could never have imagined. And in several cases, the public judged the photographs long before it understood the person behind them. Hollywood and celebrity culture have always sold us the illusion that youth can somehow be preserved. But time was never the enemy. The greater danger may be believing that growing older makes us less worthy of being seen. Faces change. Bodies change. Even the stars we once thought timeless eventually grow older alongside us. Perhaps real beauty isn't found in defeating age at all. Perhaps it is found in recognizing ourselves when the mirror changes, and knowing that the life behind the face will always matter more than the face itself.